Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is all about the latest Hero Arts My Monthly Hero main kit and add-ons. This month's kit features mermaids and underwater creatures for summery cards, birthday cards, and anyone who loves the ocean. As always, I want to make sure each new stamp or die or stencil gets plenty of time so that you can see these products and decide what from this new release you want to add to your stash. So I'm going to go through the card making and share the new supplies along the way. So these are the stamps and dies that come in the main kit. You can see it's a 6x8 stamp set with a very large mermaid image and then some other underwater sea images and several sentiments as well. And the dies pretty much cut out all the larger images like the mermaid and all the underwater creatures and items. So I am going to start by stamping that mermaid image with some Copic friendly ink. I use my Debbie tool to get a good impression from the first stamp. And then if you do have to go back in and add a little pressure, that's what I do there. I use the corner of the tool to get that extra pressure. So I am just going to do some very basic Copic coloring. I'm not going to do any real blending and shading except for in between the colors of her rainbow hair. And that's why something like a Copic marker or other alcohol marker, any alcohol marker will do this. Those two colors, when they cross over, will blend together. I'm going to use some pixie tape to hold that large die in place. And now I'm going to share with you the Tide stencil. This is a very detailed cut stencil. So I recommend using something like pixie spray from Thermoweb to get it to stay in place on your paper. Otherwise, those thin little pieces are going to get pulled up or even kind of warped out of place. So if you use the pixie spray, it temporarily holds that stencil in place. Just make sure you wait until the pixie spray dries before you put it down. Otherwise, it might tear the paper. I'm going to use some of the new Hero Arts white pearl paste, and I'm going to use Simon Hurley's scraper tool to get a nice even thin impression of that white pearl paste on top of white cardstock. Now I'll be showing more about this paste in an upcoming new and must-have crafty supplies video, but for now let me just share that it goes on really smoothly. I love that it's white with that pearl essence in it, and I'm going to share some fun things that you can do with it, like I said, later in another video. I do want to just carefully peel up the edge of my cardstock, which is stuck to my glass mat because of the overspray of the pixie spray, which is great, keeps that cardstock in place. So you can see there that white on white of that beautiful detail, but I'm going to add some Dina Wakley acrylic spray on top in a pretty turquoise color and just dab away that excess because I don't want pools of the color. I just want it to sit in the spots that the paste is not. It will sit a little bit on top of the paste as well. That's okay. I am going to use a sentiment from the stamp set, and I am going to heat emboss that with some silver embossing powder and just cut that out, and then use some of that turquoise spray around the edge so that this sentiment strip is not so bright white and kind of ruins the effect of the other colors on the card panel. I'm going to use a few foam squares from Thermoweb. I've mentioned this before, they're extra sticky, so they stick to things like that acrylic spray and that pearl paste. And then I'm going to use some liquid glue like Ultra Bond, that's nice and strong, to adhere the seagrass behind the mermaid and then pop up the sentiment as well. Absolutely love this card. It was so much fun to make and so many different pretty summery colors in it. Okay, for the next step we're going to look at, it's called Message in a Bottle Bundle. Comes with all of these stamps and then the dies cut out the larger images as well. Most of the sentiments fit in one or the other of the bottle and the images as well. I'm going to use some embossable plastic from Judikins, and I'm going to put both bottles down in my mini Misty on the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of acrylic plastic. It's important if you're going to do heat embossing on it to use something that is embossable. So you can add heat to this plastic. Make sure you use tons of anti-static powder because acetate is very staticky, and so the embossing powder wants to stick everywhere. I'm going to use Versamark ink, and then I'm going to use some white embossing powder from Hero Arts and pour it on top. You can see that I'm adding little bits of heat at a time so as not to warp the plastic. Even though it's embossable, it can still warp if you hold that tool on there for too long. Look at how perfectly this sentiment fits and how perfectly the Sailboat fits inside these two bottles. So I'm going to go and do this whole process over again, only this time I'm going to use a different color embossing powder. Again, tons of anti-static powder here so that your embossing powder doesn't stick where you don't want it. And then that Versamark ink is perfect. And this time I'm using the Hero Arts gold embossing powder on top, and just want to make sure that that white embossing powder was nice and dry and cool before you add the gold. Otherwise, the gold will stick on top of that as well. And again, little bursts of heat so that you can get that embossing powder to melt without warping the plastic too much. You may get a little bit of warping, but you don't want it completely bent to the point where you can't adhere it down to the card. This is the Antique Hero Map Bold Prints. I absolutely love this. I think this is a great background for tons of different cards. So I'm going to take out my Misty mouse pad. I'm going to put my grip from Tim Holtz back into the Misty because that's going to help keep my cardstock in place. So check this out. I'm going to put some craft cardstock right in the center-ish of the Misty, and then I'm going to place that 6x6 rubber stamp right on top. And then I'm going to add some Distress Oxide ink. So I'm stamping a brown ink on top of the craft cardstocks to get that subtle background. I don't want anything too much in your face. I just want a subtle background that looks like a subtle pattern paper. And I think this fits the bill. So this is the perfect background, but I'm going to tear the top to give it kind of an organic sand or land feel to it. And then I'm going to trim off a little bit of the bottom as well and layer it over a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of blue cardstock for the water or sky. I'm going to take a little bit of Hero Arts white unicorn pigment ink and an ink blender, and I'm just going to put little hazy clouds at the top so that we'll have a little bit of a toned down effect on that bright, bright blue. I also stamped some other stamps from the Bottles stamp set so that I could Copic color those and die cut them out as some accents and embellishments. So I'm going to use some tape runner to adhere down that map craft cardstock down to the blue cardstock. You can see the little wisps of clouds at the top. I'm going to use some liquid glue behind some of the elements of those message bottles so that it hides that adhesive a little bit. So there are some thicker parts to the sentiments and some thicker parts to the outline as well. I'm just dotting some of the adhesive on there. This is a strong adhesive, so you don't need a ton, honestly, and it will stay put once you get it down. So I have both bottles on there now adhered down, and then I'm going to pop up some of the flowers that I colored and die cut on some foam squares just as a little bit of embellishment and a little pop of color there. But I do love the gold and white bottles with that clear acetate. That is just a fun way to use this set. This is the Dark Sea Bold Prints stamp. You can see this is another rubber cling stamp. This is a silhouette stamp. So all the little images are going to not be stamped and the background is going to be stamped. So this is a fun one to do multicolor stamping with. Again, I have my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of white cardstock this time on the Tim Holtz grip, and you'll see like it doesn't stick to the grip, but it stays in place in my Misty. So it has been a lifesaver for me to do things like this, to stamp where I don't want the edge of the stamp to show up on the cardstock. So I put the cardstock kind of in the middle of the Misty where there's a border around all sides and use that cling stamp to do some multicolor stamping. So I'm using 3 different colors of blue ink from Hero Arts. I'll link to everything down below in the YouTube description box below the video, and you can see that I did some swiping side to side with the ink pads to get that movement and look of ocean waves. And I absolutely love this stamp set, this stamp. It is such a cool look with the elements in the silhouette. This is the Mermaid Wishes bundle. So there are several mermaids and some little sea creatures as well as some sentiments and a couple of dies to cut things out. I am going to do some very basic Copic coloring. The only thing that I really did want to share is that all of these elements are going to be underwater. So once I color them in, I'm going to take the color that I colored the bottle and I am going to color on top of everything. So I started with the paper inside the bottle and then I realized the mermaid is under the water as well. So I'm going to finish coloring her with just some accents and I'm going to take the brush tip and just gently go across the whole thing. You can see that the red was not completely, of her hair was not completely dry, and so it did smear a little bit there, so that's why I stopped coloring over there. I'm going to finish just swiping across everything with that blue, and that will give the appearance that even the tail, the cork, like everything is underwater. And once she was a little more dry, I did the rest of her with a blue hint as well. I'm going to use some VersaFine ink to stamp the sentiment, and then I'm going to use some clear embossing powder on top. And when you heat set that, you can see that it really does get shiny, a tiny bit raised, and it really shows up on that, even that detailed background. I'm going to pop up our mermaid on some foam squares and then use some liquid adhesive so that I can put the starfish kind of in her hair and then the shell behind the bottle. Then I'm going to use some Nuvo Crystal Glaze on top of just the bottle so that it looks like it is truly glass. Just a few fun techniques on this card that made it a lot of fun to create. I'm going to use that dark sea background with one color of ink this time. It's called Summer Sky. It's one of my favorite colors from Hero Arts. I've had this ink pad forever and it has not needed to be refilled yet. So that's the benefit of using those felt ink pads, is that they last a lifetime. Okay, the Jawsome Sharks bundle is a really cute set. There are some fun images and sentiments like "I hope your day is killer." And so I stamped a bunch of them out, Copic colored them in, and I'm going to use some pixie tape to hold them in place to die cut them. And then I'm just going to pop them up on that background. I cut the background down to 4 by 5 1/4 so I could layer it on some Hero Arts navy cardstock. It's one of my favorite navies out there. And I'm just using some foam squares to pop these guys up. I'm going to use that same navy cardstock with some anti-static powder tool, some Versamark ink, and some silver embossing powder to stamp a sentiment that says "You're totally Jawsome." But like I said, there's some really fun birthday sentiments as well. So this could be a great card for shark lovers, summer birthdays, guys, just anybody who likes sea creatures. So just a totally different look, but so easy to put together. And especially just using that one color in the background still looks phenomenal. You don't have to use and have a ton of inks to create a really great background like this. Next up from Hero Arts this month, this is the Lighthouse and Sailboat cover plate. This is a 4 by 5 1/4 cover plate, cuts out all of these fun details of a lighthouse, clouds, there's a sailboat, and some water and waves. So I am going to adhere down a white die cut panel down to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of white cardstock. And then I have all these little bits and pieces, and I tried to keep them sort of in the order that they go. Some of them didn't really fall that way. And I know you can use, some plastic wrap to hold them and pick them up. This is fine for me. I just like to have kind of a little bit of a puzzle day. So when I do die cut inlay, I just kind of go with the flow and pick up the pieces. This one is a real easy one to figure out where everything fits into place. I am using some brushes to brush on some ink, and I'm trying to keep some brush strokes on there so it looks like a painted background. So this is not where I'm trying to fully opaque cover the pieces. If I was doing that, I would probably use my domed foam blenders for that and get full coverage. I am trying to get that sort of brushstroke look so that it looks like I kind of painted this whole background. So I'm working on the sky right now, and I'm using Distress Oxide Tumble Glass for that. For the water, I'm actually using Salty Ocean. I thought that was perfect. And again, with some brush strokes, you have those little bits of white showing. I feel like that gives it that kind of organic paintbrush look. And then what I do is I just put a little bit of liquid adhesive right in the open area where I know the piece I'm about to use fits, and then just pop the piece right in place and then just let it dry. So for the sailboat sails, I used some squeezed lemonade Honestly, for the boat itself, I just used whatever was on the brush. I don't even remember what I used last. I just used the leftover ink that was on that brush. And then for the lighthouse, I used Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink. I used one of the sentiments from the main kit stamp set and some black ink, and I multi-stamped it so that it fit into those little grooves of the die cut inlay as well. But I really love the effect of creating a painted background so easily with this die cut inlay technique. I had so much fun with this month's kit and add-ons, but I'd love to hear what your favorite was today. Let me know down in the comments below. If you missed my video last month from Hero Arts May kit, I'm going to link to that over here. I think they still have a few left. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. Here come the pigeons. I just literally, there's this huge window over here and the pigeons like flying at the window and then just kind of at the last second took a nice incline up to the roof, I guess. That's it. There's really nothing more to say.